Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. My dear brothers and sisters, in this video we are going to start the brief history of England. History of England starts with history of invaders because you can see in this part of England we can see there are so many invasions, there are so many people occupy this island. After occupying this island, they are also became the part and parcel of this population. So first, the Celts. Who are these Celts? The Celts are nothing but they are very fierce fighters, but they lacked the political skills. That's why they can't rule this region so much longer. So even you can even know the Wales is the part of the Great Britain island. So in the Wales they speak Welsh language. So modern Welsh language derived from the Celtic language. This language is spoken by these Celtic people, and even their version of the language only derived into the Gaelic language that was spoken in Scotland. So from this you can understand who are the Celts. So after the Celts, who came and um, who invaded this part? Okay, so and you have to understand this period of this cells in England is Iron Age. What does the Iron Age means? Iron Age means the people started using the iron tools in this period. So the period is 600 BC. This means what? So as per the Christians calculation, 600 years before the birth of the Christ. That is nothing but 600 BC. So the Celtic people are the first people who invaded the region of England. So after Celts, who invaded the England? Romans. You know the mighty Romans. They came from the Europe. They actually occupied all the parts of Europe. Last but not least, they even wanted to conquer the England. So while conquering England, even Julius Caesar during 55 BC, 55 before the birth of the Christ, according to the calculation of Christians. So Julius Caesar even tried to conquer this part, but he failed for many reasons. He did not initiate the invasions. Instead of conquering this part of England, he conquered the another part of Europe that is so called Gaul. It is today's Germany. So even Julius Caesar attempted to conquer, but this attempt was failed. So after this first attempt, after 100 years, 100 means 43 years after the birth of the Christ as per their calculation. So the 43 AD, they actually successfully conquered the England. Who conquered England? Romans. In which year? 43 AD. So you also have to understand for more than 300 years the Romans stayed in England. So the Romans built many roads, they built up the trade and agriculture of the island. Even under the Roman occupation, even the towns were developed, and even the excavations show that the houses of the Roman period in England had a better heating system compared to the modern England. So you can understand the Romans brought civilization to England during their period. So before Romans, the England was uncivilized barbaric region. But Romans actually have to withdraw from Britain in order to protect their region from the invaders. So the Britons were actually unoccupied now because Romans left the Britain, but the Britons were defenseless. They were not able to protect themselves from the invaders. That's why even the next wave of invasions began, and this time it was Anglo-Saxons who invaded the Britain. So who were Anglo-Saxons? In which period they came? So the period was 450 to 600 AD. So there was the wave of invasions of Anglo-Saxons. They came from Scotland and Ireland. You know where the Scotland and Ireland with respect to the England. So they came from Scotland and Ireland. They from 450 to 600 AD. They began their expansion. So the Britain was under the Anglo-Saxons. Even the Anglo-Saxons were not like civilized people, just like Romans. They were barbarians. They worshipped the gods of Norse. It was the mythological god, and it was like a varied gods. So Anglo-Saxons were barbarians. They were not Christians. Okay, even Romans were not Christians, but Romans were highly civilized and highly advanced people compared to Anglo-Saxons. But Anglo-Saxons were highly uncivilized barbarians, and they worshipped the gods of Norse mythology, and they were great warriors. Okay, and they formed the seven kingdoms. These seven kingdoms are called as heptarchy. Okay, so the Anglo-Saxons were the greater influence on the British language. Even the English language was derived from the Anglo-Saxons. Even right now, many of the words of Anglo-Saxons are used in English language right now. Okay, for example, in the England, you may hear the different towns names ending with ing. For example, Workingham, Buckingham. Likewise, ing. The terms ing was used in the place names. Orton, Hamilton, or Southampton. So TUN. The turn also was the word derived from Anglo-Saxons. And these Anglo-Saxon people are fond of stories, and these people have the habit they will gather around the fire and they will listen to the tales of the battle. And the most famous of these stories are Beowulf. So what is this Beowulf? The story gives the very accurate account of what is Anglo-Saxons, what are the habits of Anglo-Saxons. So basically these Anglo-Saxons were very courageous people. Okay, so during this time only the first known English poet was lived during this period. He was Cadmon. And another poet during this period of Anglo-Saxon was Wolf, and he lived during the period of 500s. Actually, the first known English poet was lived during the period of 600s, Catbone. And another poet of Anglo-Saxon times, of Wolf, he lived during 500s. So, in this period, even the Romans were the first to introduce Christianity to the England. In this period also, the Anglo-Saxons were introduced about Christianity. So, in England, Christianity was introduced for second time after the Romans. But this time it was not for the natives, it was for the Anglo-Saxons. In this time, the Saint Augustine, he traveled from France to England, and he converted the king of the Jews, so-called Ethelbert, to Christianity. And even he built the monastery at Canterbury, and he preached the Christianity in different parts of the England. Okay, but even now the cells, those who are living in the England, they were not Christians. They were following the Anglo. They neither follow any religion. They neither follow any culture. They have their own culture, own language. So this was the period of Anglo-Saxons. But unfortunately, during the 800s, the Anglo-Saxons will become very very weak. At this time, the Danish people invaded this in region. The Danish were people are also called as Vikings. You may hear of Mongolians in Islamic history. Okay, the Genghis Khan. So they were the Mongolians of Europe, just like Mongolians in Asia, the Vikings in Europe. So Mongolians, they literally leave nothing when they invade any country, because they will kill all the people including the baby and women. Just like that, Vikings also did the same to the England. During 800s, during the Anglo-Saxon period, the English people were brutally murdered by the Danish invaders, so called as Vikings. But during the Alfred the Great, he almost protected his region from the Danish invasions, from the Vikings. But in 1899, at the end of 9th century, he died. After he died, again the Danish invaders literally sacked the many English cities. So this came to an end of Anglo-Saxon period. The last king of Anglo-Saxon was Edward the Confessor, and he ruled till 1066. Until this, the early medieval period of English ends. Until this Anglo-Saxon dynasty came to an end in England. So next to Anglo-Saxons, who actually invaded? You see, literally the Britons are defenseless. Continuously, many people were continuously invading the country. Why? Because the people cannot protect themselves from the outside invasions. Even though you have to understand this, Britain was the island. The island was not easy to capture, but still all people were easily capturing the England. So in this way we can understand the British history was full of invasions, ancient history. Okay, so next to Anglo-Saxons, who invaded? Normans. Who were the Normans? The Normans were the people, those who are living in the region called Normandy. Normandy means what? Normandy means it is the part of the France. Okay, at the time the William the Duke, so Duke means the position, the name of the position. So the Duke of Normandy, the William, so also called as William the Conqueror, was the first king of the Normans who ruled in England. Okay, and he was crowned as the king of England. He was responsible for establishing the strong central government of England. But what he did was he did worse to the Anglo-Saxons, because the Anglo-Saxons were initially ruling this region, but he appointed the Norman lords as advisory councils instead of Anglo-Saxons. Anglo-Saxons were treated very worse. They were made into serfs. What is a serf? The slave laborers, the bonded slave laborers, அதாவது விவசாய கொத்தடிமைகள், அதாவது பண்ணை கொத்தடிமைன்னு சொல்லலாம், serfs, the bonded laborers. So the Anglo-Saxons were treated very worse in this period, but they were the initial ruling dynasty before the arrival of Normans. And even the feudalism was introduced by the Normans in England. What is the feudalism? It was just the land administrative system. The king was literally the owner of all lands. So no people can own any land. The land was taken from all the people, from all the peasants by the king. And the king have to lend it to the barons and knights. Barons and knights are very powerful people in his kingdom. Knights were the very powerful people in the army. And they were the tenants. Tenants means வாடகைதாரர்கள், குத்தகைதாரர்கள். So they have to rent the land from the king, and they were called as tenants in chief because they were the tenants to the king. So they have to lend the land to the subtenants, and subtenants, they have to till the land using the peasants and the villains. Okay, and apart from this hierarchy, they were the people called freemen. They were not falling under this any of the hierarchy, and they were not working under this land. Okay, and the barons and knights, because they are getting the lands from the king, they have to pay the taxes, as well as they also have to support the king with their army. So knights have their own army. Every knights have their own army. Knights are the position of the army, so they have their own army. So whenever there is a situation of the war, the knights have to support the king. There is a situation of knights. So they both have to pay taxes, and they have to support the king. So the king is enjoying both financial as well as military power because of this feudal system. So not only the feudal system was introduced by Normans, also there was another system called strip system. The land was divided into many strips of 1 acre. So based on the survey, he divided into many strips, and based on these strips, he collected the revenue. So for the survey, the William, the Duke of Normandy, so called as William the Conqueror, he compiled one book of survey. This book is called as Doomsday Book. And next, actually the Normans initially they spoke French as they came from France. That was the part of Normandy, was a part of the France. But later they mixed with Anglo-Saxons. They got up with Anglo-Saxons, and they get the accent of English that was spoken in German accent. It was spoken by Anglo-Saxons. So this was the story of Normans ruling in England. Okay. And next, what are the kings who ruled? You know the first king, the William the Conqueror, who was Duke of Normandy. So first William the First, and then succeeded by William the Two, and then Henry I. So Henry I was the brother of William II, and Henry I was succeeded by Stephen. He was the son of the Henry I, and Henry II. Who was this Henry II? The Henry II was the important person because Henry II, he was the son of Matilda and Geoffrey. He was not the son of Stephen. Actually, the Stephen is nephew of Henry I. Okay, Stephen is not the son of Henry I. Stephen is a nephew of the Henry I. Henry II is also not the son of Stephen. Henry II is the son of Matilda and Geoffrey, and he was also the count. Count is like just like Duke. The count is another title. So in the Anjou region, he was a count. So Count of Anjou. He became the first king of Plantagenet family. So the Henry II literally controlled the rebellious barons and strengthened the kingship. So in this way he brought the order, but next he wanted to control the Church of England. So this led to the bitter and well-known conflict between Henry II and Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket is nothing but Archbishop of Canterbury. Archbishop is just like the father, and because of this, there was a bitter rivalry between Henry II and Thomas Becket. Henry II was succeeded by his son Richard the Lionheart. So if you know about Salahuddin, who liberated the Palestine, Jerusalem from the Christians, you know about Richard the Lionheart. Okay, just like now, the our holy place, Palestine, Jerusalem was under the oppression of non-Muslims. But right now, we are not able to liberate this land because of our lack of iman. But at the time, Muslims were not like that. Muslims under the head of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, who was the king of Egypt and Syria at the time, he liberated the Palestine from the Christians. At the time, against Salahuddin Ayyubi, Richard the Lionheart, who was fought in the battle. You have to understand, he just fought the battle not for conquering any land. He just fought the battle just to liberate the land for Christians. That's why he was not able to stay in the England, because England and Palestine is so long. So literally he was the ruler, but practically he was not in the lands of England. So succeeded by him the John. John, he was not the good king. He was not in the good terms with the church. So even he fought with the barons and Pope Innocent III. Okay, so the barons wanted to reduce the powers of John. So the barons, along with leaders of church, they drove up the document called Magna Carta. The Magna Carta means it was the law book of the England. It was the first attempt made by English people to strengthen their liberty from the king by making the law. So this Magna Carta was considered as the father of all the law books that was adopted for all the countries, because at the time the world was literally ruled by the barbarian laws. There is no any law. Simply the barbarians ruling as per their wish in the name of the kings and queens and dynasties. So there is no means of any law. But you have to understand, Magna Carta was introduced before even Magna Carta, before several centuries before Magna Carta, before several hundred years before Magna Carta. Okay, the Quran was the drafted constitution of the Islamic rule. Okay, so Islamic law has to be considered. The Sharia has to be considered as the father of all the constitution. But the world does not know about the history of Islam. That's why the Magna Carta was considered as the father of all the constitution, all the law books that was adopted over all the parts of the world. So in this way, the Plantagenet family, the John, because of the bad behavior of the John the king, the barons wanted to control him. So because they wanted to control him, they drafted a document called Magna Carta. So John have to forcefully agree this document. There is no other go. So after this, during the reign of his successor Edward I, the parliament model was shown by the Edward I in 1295. So parliament is nothing but it's just the advisory council. So the king will discuss with the ministers and make any decision. So the Edward first used to call the meetings of nobles, churchmen, knights, and few representatives of towns. And historians refer one such meeting was Model Parliament in 1295. This Model Parliament was the pattern for later parliaments. Okay, so you have to understand, even the Quran asking the Prophet ﷺ to discuss with his companions and come to the conclusion and come to any decision. So even before 1295, Edward First, the Islam gave the model parliament, but again the Islamic history was not known by the world people. That's why they considered Edward I, his meeting with the nobles and the representative of towns as the model parliament. And during his reign, the region of Wales was brought under the English control. That's why in 1301 he gave the title the Prince of Wales. The Prince means Ilavarasar. So Prince means his son. So he gave the title the Prince of Wales to his son. Actually, his son was born in the Wales. That's why he gave the title Prince of Wales. So in 1301, he gave the title to his son, the Prince of Wales. So this title became the tradition to refer to all the male heirs to the throne still now. Still now, if you yeah, if you come with the title of Prince of Wales in England, it was actually referring the son of the King of England. So still now this tradition was followed. Okay, so this tradition goes back to the 1301. So this is what the beginning of Parliament and what is the legacy of Edward I. So following Edward I, Edward II came and Edward III came. So Edward II was succeeded by Edward III. So Edward III, who is Edward III? Edward III is the successor of Edward II. So Edward II actually married the daughter of French King Philip IV, Isabella, and because of this, Edward III actually the son of French Queen. That's why he claimed the throne of France. As England King, Edward III claimed the throne of France as he was the son of French Queen. Actually, this led to the war between France and England. This war was called as 100 Years' War. Why this war was 100 Years' War? Because this war was carried out for 100 years continuously without any gap. There may be some few gaps. For 100 years, there was a war between England and France between 1337 to 1453. You see, 14th century and 15th century. Okay, and during this period only, Edward III only, the greatest writers of Middle English period born and they lived during this period. You may heard of the story, the Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales was written during this period. It was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. This English poet Geoffrey Chaucer lived during the Edward III's period. The Canterbury Tales was his masterpiece. These Canterbury Tales accurately captures the life and habits of the people of this time. Even other poets of the great Middle English period lived during this period. They were John Gower and William Langland. And William Langland's masterpiece, Piers Plowman, is just like Canterbury Tales. It will give us the fascinating glimpse of English life during the period of Edward III, during the period of 14th century. So you have to understand that Edward III was the person who was responsible for starting the 100 Years' War. Even after Edward III, this war continues. So during Richard II period also, this war continues. But during this period, he saw the rebellion of a person called Wat Tyler. Even though he put on the rebellion, Richard II was very, very unpopular. That's why he has to abdicate. He has to step down from his throne. He has to pave the way for the family of Lancaster. What is our Lancaster? Lancaster is one place. Okay, so in Lancaster one family is there, that is Henry family. Okay, the Henry IV, he was the Duke of Lancaster. Duke was the position of one region. So Duke is just like the king of that particular region. So Henry IV is the Duke of Lancaster. He succeeded the Richard II. After Richard II abdicated his throne. So Henry IV did not pay much attention to the 100 Years' War, war against France. Okay, because he was busy fighting with the small English nobles in this region. But his son Henry V revived the 100 Years' War, and even he forced the French king to accept him as regent, because in 1415 in Agincourt he defeated the France in such a way. That's why France have to consider to the demands of Henry V. Henry V now was the officially the regent of the country called France. This was the greatest victory. It was the greatest victory the England had achieved its heights against the France. But this victory was not continued until 1428. England had the upper hand. But what happened means Henry V died. After Henry V died, again the France refused to obey the English kings. Again the English people have to fight against the French people. Again the war continued until 1428. The English had the upper hand. But after 1428, situation reversed and tables turned, and the situation was in favor of France. And the lady called Joan of Arc, that is she helped France in succeeding the France, that is defeating the England in the 100 Years' War. So the English have to completely came out of France after defeated by the France in 100 Years' War. But they have left completely except the place called Calais. So after 100 Years' War, you have to understand. After 100 Years' War, there is called as Wars of Roses. Why the Wars of? What's the name given like that? Why it's given like that? So actually there are two regions. York, there is one region in England, and Lancaster region is England. So Duke of York is Edward. Duke of Lancaster Henry. Already you know Henry IV. So Henry IV, Henry V, Henry VI, they belong to the house of Lancaster. Edward IV, Edward V, they belong to the house of York. So there are two different families. They are living in the two different regions, York and Lancaster. Edward means York, Henry means Lancaster. So if the names come, Henry means it was Lancaster. Okay, so you have to understand when during Henry VII's reign period, the Duke of York, Edward, claimed the throne of England. That's why there was the war between the House of York and House of Lancaster. Then why it is called as Wars of Roses? The House of York has symbol white roses. House of Lancaster have symbol red roses. As the symbols, both of them having the symbols of roses, that's why it is called as Wars of Roses. So this is the civil war between two houses, York and Lancaster, known as the Wars and Roses, and the name was derived from the symbols, the white roses of Yorks and red roses of Lancastrians. The war lasted for 1455 to 1485 and ended with the defeat of Henry VI by Edward IV. So Edward IV became the king. Now the House of York again came to the throne. But after Edward IV died, his sons were cruelly imprisoned by the Richard III. Richard III, he was the cousin of Edward IV. So Richard III imprisoned his sons of Edward IV, just like Edward V was imprisoned by Richard III. Okay, so Richard III proclaimed himself as the king, as Richard III. So after Richard III became the king, now the person came Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor was son of Henry VI. He was defeated by the Edward IV. Now Henry Tudor, he actually married Elizabeth. Elizabeth was the daughter of Edward IV. By this, he joined hands with Edward family, the York family, and defeated Richard, and he proclaimed himself as the Emperor Henry VII. Okay, and his rule was lasted, okay, for long time, because of this he united the Lancaster family and York family. He united the House of York and House of Lancaster. From the after this Tudor England, it was England is called as Tudor England because for more than 100 years, from 1485 to 1603, his the dynasty only ruling England. His heirs only he established the monarchy and they gave England internal order and peace. In the next video, we are going to see about Tudor England in this period. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.